We are just really thrilled to have Dr. Bonnie Taylor with us tonight, and I will do a very brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to her to give you a more in-depth introduction. But I have had the pleasure of knowing Bonnie since she was a junior in high school when she walked into the college fair where I was representing Muskingum College at the time. And so it has been extremely rewarding for me to watch Bonnie go from that cheerleader in high school to the cheerleader in college, and to continue just such an incredible career and such a life of advocacy. And I am so honored to have you here tonight, Bonnie, joining us. So if you wouldn't mind, I know that Danielle has some questions prepared to go over with you, but I would love for you to give a little introduction. Most people on here have read a bio, but tell us a little bit more about Bonnie.
Happy to. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. You never know who's wanting to actually hear your story, but it's good to see the familiar faces, and it's wonderful to see the ones that I hope I will know soon. As Jennifer said, I am Bonnie Taylor. I am a 2005 graduate of Muskingum. I'm originally from Akron, Ohio, graduated from Firestone High School, class of 01. And I've known Jen now for 21 years at this point. I just realized that. It's a long time. But I do, and I was giving the story before everyone popped on here, but I do remember that evening in our cafeteria, meeting her and learning about Muskingum and what they had to offer. And it was a decision that I'm grateful that I made to engage in that conversation. The person that you see now was a little different then. I was a lot quieter. And really was not much for small talk, learning about anything, but very grateful for that conversation at that time. My journey through Muskingum was your stereotypical one. I was a student leader on campus. I tried to get involved wherever I could. I was grateful that I had a lot of great folks who were cheering me on along the way, correcting me when I needed to be corrected. Helping me to focus on the things that were important. I had some really great friends while I was there. This is attest to the power of relationships. 2 of them are here now. Now, mind you, these are professionals who work during the day and don't necessarily have to be here right now. So I appreciate them greatly, but even more so, I am grateful for those relationships. I'm grateful for the administration at Muskingum as well, then and current, who still see the value of my involvement and participation. So I realized that there was a career in student affairs when I was close to graduation, and the associate dean then was becoming the dean of students at another institution and had an open position. And I recall him saying, like, you should apply, just think about it. You know, if you get an interview, go down. And, you know, I was graduating and I did not have a job. And I had changed my major halfway through my senior year. So what do you think I was going to do? I was going to go on that interview and figure out what this job was about. But it was the best thing that could have happened at that time, because it allowed me to see that I could work with college students for the remainder of my career. This is something that I'm very interested in. I'm passionate about. I love the engagement piece. I love advocacy. I love having the hard conversations that allow someone to grow and develop. And I have not regretted that decision to go on that interview since that point. So Muskingum is woven through all of the parts of my career, definitely.
Can everybody hear me? Well, thank you, Bonnie, again for joining us this evening, making time, and I'm sure your busy schedule. It is so nice to meet you face to face, and I hope we can work together in the future. But I'm Danielle Gregory. I'm the Director of Diversity, Access, and Inclusion here, and our day office has been here since August 1, 2019. So we're so excited to host our Black History Month for the second annual Black History Month. And this is the first time we've actually collaborated with admissions and the alumni office to host something like this. So thank you for being a part of one of our firsts. So I want to ask you, during your time at Muskingum, what was something you appreciated, or more than one thing that you appreciated most as a student?
There's quite a few things. I appreciated the relationships that I had all around, and I'll put them in tiers of folks, definitely. I can still remember the cleaning staff of Kelly Hall, where I was an RA on the ground floor, who took care of us like nobody else's business. And Miss Patty and Steve would always take care of us very, 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 very well. And it was more than just, let's make sure that we clean the bathrooms. It was very much so that we were an extension of them and their kids. And I appreciated that feeling from the staff from there. The friends that I walked away from Muskingum with are lifelong friends. It isn't just folks that I enjoyed my time at Muskingum with. It's people that I truly have carried with me, who have been here through good, bad accomplishments, the low points of the roller coaster, all of those parts. I will say, and I'm not sure for the students who are on, how closely you got to work with Janet Heater-Bass, but Janet was one of the first people I met when I got onto campus. Janet is one of the reasons why I was involved in residence life as an RA. She was the person who reassured my mother that it was okay to leave me at Muskingum at that point. And is one of the reasons why I have been in this career field. Because there's many times when, especially if any other student affairs pros understand, you want to walk away because it can be a burnout career path sometimes. And higher ed often will test how far and how long you're willing to go in sacrificing some things. But Janet was always there with a listening ear. She was going to challenge you on whatever it was and whatever decision it was, but she did it in a way that allowed you to make your own decision and to feel as though you were finding a purpose in things. So it was my friends, for sure. It was the staff and Janet, probably the best things for me that came with my experience at Muskingum.
Thank you for that. So given your familiarity with Muskingum and your experience here, and now going on and working at an HBCU and being in diversity and advocation work, what is something or some things that you felt would have been beneficial for you as a student at Muskingum then?
So I was one of 5 Black women on campus the time I was there. There were 4 that came in with me and 1 that was there before I arrived. So, and that was probably for about 2 or 3 years until maybe around my junior or senior year. There were a few more that were added to the group. And so let me put some context and some background to that. I went to a high school in which I would say Black students made up about 35% of the population. So it wasn't as if I was in an environment that was very heavily Black. It was still predominantly white, but most of the courses that I took, I was probably one of the few Black students in the course. So with that, it wasn't an unfamiliar setting, but I think some of the challenges that come along the way was I was a kid that grew up in Akron. So I was a city kid essentially who was in a very rural area, and that was very new to me. And I remember coming onto campus for move-in. I was assigned to Memorial Hall, and coming onto campus, right when you get to the top where, if I'm recalling, I haven't been to campus in a couple of years, but right when you get to the top of that hill, football stadium's down to the right. Stag House and the Ulster House. And at that time, there's a huge window that's over there. It's a really good sized window for whoever has that room. But there was a huge Confederate flag sitting in that window as we crested that hill to come across. And you can imagine my father was none too pleased and or happy at this point about where he had chosen to drop his daughter off for college. And for me, that set the tone of, I'm like, okay, well, at least I know where I am, and I need to act accordingly. And when we talk about act accordingly, that is, I was very slow to venture into the neighborhood and into the community, very slow to get to know a lot of folks because I was just hesitant. Had to be very cautious in how I chose to interact because I didn't know the environment in which I was at that point. So that left an impression, but I also think it helped me to navigate and to become closer with the other students, specifically Black students on campus, that we became our own community to support each other very, very heavily, and to really walk through that experience together. And it's not to state that I dealt with something every single day, but there were several times in the community where there's some microaggressions, some very stereotypical behavior, concerns. I have been in a car with other Muskingum students and gotten stopped more times than I care to think about right now by the New Concord police. You again learn what you need to do to get out of the situation and to move on. But I also knew I had safe spaces on that campus. I also knew the folks who I could go to. You all probably do not recall. Ken Lee used to be one of the student affairs professionals that was there at the time. And Ken was always a person that we could go to talk to about anything that was a concern. Janet was another person we could always go to. Carrie was there for the first time when I was there originally. She was my area coordinator, was another individual I could always go and talk to when I had concerns, when I needed to strategize and figure out what I needed to do to get through a situation. So you learned to navigate is what I would definitely say.
Thank you. I have a number of follow-up questions, but I'm not going to steal all that shine because I know that there are some students in the room who want to follow up with questions. So we will revisit some of those things that you discussed. And I'm sure that Jen shared with you our theme this year, the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And so I'm interested to know, how do you promote representation, identity, and diversity in both your professional and your personal life?
I would definitely say it's owning who I am and my experiences and what I bring to the table. This is my first experience working at an HBCU, so historically Black college and university. And previous to that, were predominantly white institutions, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and Muskegon University. Now it was college at the time that I worked there. And I accepted that often I wasn't going to be the only one at the table. But given that I had that seat, I was going to have to outwork a lot of folks. I was going to have to outsmart a lot of folks. I was going to have to out effort a lot of folks when I didn't feel like it, when it was unfair. And even when sometimes I did not get the credit that I was due, but knowing that my reputation was on the line and that I was often holding place for someone else coming behind me, I had to do whatever it took to make sure that I kept that place at that table.
Yeah. So I am going to go backtrack one time, and I do want to ask you, as you spoke about your transition, right? Your first day coming up that hill and seeing that Confederate flag. We still have students who have experienced that today, maybe not right on our campus, right? But in the surrounding village, there may be some signage around. Is there anything that you feel like, if it had been on campus, would have made your transition smoother, or would have made you more comfortable to transition? You did mention there were places that you could go that you had to get to know. Was there anything presented to you as an incoming freshman that you knew, this is where I can go, or this is what makes me feel safe, or this is what I can do to feel I can have a safe and educational experience as I transition from Akron to New Concord?
You know, what I will say to that is, again, me at 18 is a lot different than me now. think it was one of those that I just internalized and didn't think anything of it. My mother, I believe, was the one who actually talked to Janet about that when I arrived, and Janet immediately had them take that down. So I do want to clarify, it didn't stay in that window. It was immediately removed. And to me, that spoke volumes that while that may be the sentiment of some, it wasn't the sentiment of all. So that did for me show that this was a safe space if people were willing to have the hard conversations and to take action where they needed to take the action. Jan at that time was the dean of students, and she gave a very, in-depth look of what it meant to be a student at Muskingum. And that evening, it also included what it meant to look at diversity from a different lens. And what I appreciated wasn't the conversation of you need to assimilate or you need to fit in for the Black students. It was a conversation to other students of, I need you to move outside of the comfort zone of wherever that is and realize that there are people who have not been in your high schools, who have not lived in your communities, and that you need to get to know people outside of your comfort zone. So that showed that it was a different type of place. What I would say were immediate safe spaces at that point. Student affairs was my safe space. There were folks there who always had open doors, who may not always have understood exactly what I was going through at the time, but were there with a listening ear at that time to do whatever made me feel comfortable in the moment. Now, I will not pretend to know what students may have gone through right now. The environment is much different than what it was when I was a student. So I will say for that is that sometimes they had to seek them out. The services that were provided at the time are more robust now. We didn't have a director of DEI when I was there. That wasn't, and to be fair, that was 20 years ago. It really wasn't a thing. It is now, which I'm grateful for the students to be able to have that experience. And for there to be more education and training around, and what I will be specific about around anti-Blackness and the sentiment, maybe in the surrounding area for the faculty and the staff, so that they're understanding what some of their students may be experiencing and having the empathy and having the understanding that you don't know what they're coming in the door with. You don't know what they may have experienced on their drive into school. You don't know what they may be experiencing in the community. So there's things that are in place now that I would have loved at that time, but I'm grateful that the students have now.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I'm going to open it up for our participants to ask questions or comments. Don't everybody speak at once now.
I will happily go first. There's a part of me that thinks, why am I going to ask this question? But I'd love to hear your response, because I'm not sure that I ever pictured you as somebody who wasn't going to use her voice. And so for the students on the call, what you need to know is that Bonnie was, captain of the cheerleader, athletic trainer, president of the student senate. I mean, you've read the bio, so you know all the things.
Homecoming queen.
That was queen, right? All of the things. So to hear you say that Bonnie is different than this Bonnie, I'd love to know if you know what was it that made you say, I'm gonna try this, or I'm gonna make something of this. And the only reason I'm hesitant to ask this question is because the students who are on this call are all really incredible leaders. So they might not need, you to coax them out of a place but they might be able to offer some advice to other people who maybe don't share the same leadership roles that they do and that you did. So what was the light switch for you?
The fact that the opportunities were there. It's a small institution, which means that you learn of those opportunities, and why not take advantage of them while they are there. I thought at the time that I wanted to go into sports medicine, so I had an opportunity to be a student athletic trainer. Why not? I learned so much that I still use today in dealing with things. But it was a really great experience in learning that field and getting to know the athletes in a different way, and learning how the sports management area and the sports training area, how they managed multiple sports at one time. It was a great opportunity that I was able to take advantage of at the time. But even beyond that, I looked at each of those as what are things that bring me joy? What are things that, and I may not have used this phrasing at that time, but what are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that I enjoy doing? How am I going to get involved in a way that would make this experience better for me? And each of the things that I was involved in allowed for that. Now, I'll be the first person to say I, at that time, didn't think I had a great interest in Student Senate. That was a Janet Heater Bass and David McMahon moment where they pretty much called me in the office and said, "So you're going to run?" And I was like, "No." They said, "Well, yeah, here the application's available. You can go ahead and turn it in." I was like, "I have other things I'm doing." They're like, "Great. So go ahead and turn that in by the end of the day and let me know if you need anything else." It's just some of those things where people are pushing you to do things because they see things that you don't necessarily see. So it's okay to allow others to help guide your path as well.
Other questions? Students in the room.
I work at college like you see this. This is nothing.
Right, I was gonna say, I tell them all the time, I'm okay with silence. I'll wait.
I'll throw one at you, Bonnie. Hi, friend. You know, I think I find myself in some situations, you know, might not all experience this, having to explain where Muskingum is a lot, or having to like describe the institution or spell it, or, you know, do all those kinds of things. What about, how do you take, you know, we've heard you speak about how much you valued your experience. How do you, and when do you see it in your, you know, you've since moved, you know, through 3 or 4 other institutions at this point. Where do you still see Muskingum in your work? And how do you talk about it with others who might have, you know, opinions about small liberal arts schools, or, you know, thoughts about, you know, Southeast Ohio and those kinds of pieces?
So I'll start with the first part of that. It's why I'm back at a small private institution. I value that experience. I value that experience for other people. It's where I was able to find myself. It was where I was able to find my voice. It was a community and a family feel that while larger institutions are wonderful, and I truly enjoyed the time that I spent there, I missed the community that's involved with a small institution, and specifically a small private liberal arts institution. There's something to be said about the education that you receive at a liberal arts institution, and specifically a smaller one, that you can't gain everywhere. In trying to explain Southeast Ohio and where things are located, a great deal of time people are always like, where is that at exactly? I'm like, well, about like an hour east of Ohio University. I mean, yeah, an hour west. And like, Ohio State, no. Opposite way. But, you know, I often will say that is I was able to really come into my own in a small village environment that I don't think I would have been able to do that anywhere else. And I'm grateful and appreciative of that. Southeast Ohio is a special place. Does it have its challenges? Absolutely. But does every place have its challenges? Absolutely. Try to get through traffic in Atlanta at about 5 o'clock on 285. That's a challenge. Okay, it's just going to be what it is. So I often look at, yes, it has its challenges, but it is a special place that provided a home that was comfortable for me for 4 years, and a place that I often return. There is no place like Southeast Ohio in the fall. I don't care what anybody says. It is one of the prettiest places on this nation's blueprint in the fall. And I will tout that to any and everybody, that there's a beauty in the location of that college.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
Good, what about you? So my name is Cameron Woodley. I'm a junior here at Muskingum. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm an engineering major here also. And then I'm from Akron, Ohio also. So
I recognized the name. I was like, I think I remember seeing her in one of the magazines.
Yeah, I think we have, crossed paths a little bit. But my question for you was, what was your favorite leadership role here on campus? And then a quick statement. I always tell people, the J, we make a hook between Akron and Muskingum University, and we're at the hook of the J. So that's what I always tell everybody about the location wise. But yeah, what was your favorite leadership role?
Oh man, I would have to say student senate president. It allowed me to have a seat on the board of trustees, and that was probably one of the most enlightening and fun experiences that I've had. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of interacting with the board. They are a very fun group of people. They are, and I'm sure there's probably still some folks there that were there when I was on, but they really care about the college. They want to know about the student experience. You know, for some other institutions, I'm sure folks are there for the prestige of saying they're there. There's still prestige in being on a board of trustees, but I truly felt as though they really wanted to be there to help navigate a path for the college and to make sure that the same experience that students had, you know, while they were there, while I was there, would be there when you all are here 20 years later on those hills. So that one for me was a very transformative experience in that I feel as though I learned much more about the governance of a college. I was able to take that with me moving forward in, you know, grad programs, but as well as in my work, and that I have seen how this operates before. I've seen how a board operates. I've seen board reports. I understand what the budgets look like. I understand what admissions trends look like at that time. And for someone to be, you know, 21 at that time and seeing that information is very helpful when you're going to that as a career path. So truly enjoyed that experience, probably as the highlight of my experience while I was at Muskingum.
Hi, I'm Reagan Savage. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm a sophomore. I'm a theater major. So a lot of the times, I'm obviously not from Ohio. I'm from Louisville, but so it's very different. I'm from a suburb, urban area, very much city, basketball games, concerts, a big little city. So everyone knows everybody, but it's a big city. So a lot of the times when I find myself coming back to school, you know, it's different from.
Did we lose Reagan? Oh no, okay.
Oh no.
Should be back, I'm sure.
I was having the same issues. Like I got kicked out.
Are you guys are on campus?
Yes.
Just keep popping back in. Jordan will let you in.
That's what I've been doing. It's like, you gotta love campus Wi-Fi.
I was gonna say, are you on the Wi-Fi, Sienna? Oh, she's.
Yeah, I am.
Did you try turning it off and then turning it back on?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work.
I was gonna get back in, but it just kicked me out for a second.
I appreciate the fact you all had Wi-Fi when I was there.
Oh, there's Reagan. She's back. Okay.
Sorry, my computer kicked me out. But so I wanted to know, how did you, I guess, like deal with certain like racial issues or like racial tensions that maybe you found yourself in, like either on campus or off campus? Like, I know for me, you know, it may not seem like a huge deal, but every time I go to Walmart or I'm with my friends and I go out, you know, say to Cambridge or to Zanesville, it's always like constant stares, and it's like for me, it's different. I'm like, oh, is there something on my face? Like, am my clothes, do they look weird or whatever? So I guess I just want to know how you dealt with those.
Yes. So I'll say a couple different things to that piece of it. That's where the community became very important. And when I say the community, it was a community of Black students, essentially, for me, because it was a group that I could go to when I was having those issues, that they would understand what I was stating, understand what I was dealing with, and understand what I was experiencing. So that was the venting piece of that. I wish at that time I would have thought more about the mental health aspect of it and would have engaged our counselors a little bit more. Again, 20 years ago, the push towards counseling was not as prevalent as it is today. So I'm grateful for you all having that exposure. But even beyond that piece of it, having the conversations, having the tough conversations with the folks who need to be held accountable for things. If I was experiencing issues on campus, and if it involved campus police, I was going to have a conversation with the chief of police. At that time, I believe it might have been Rex. I can't think of his last name right now, but it's having the conversation of let me talk about what I experienced today. And again, putting it in terms of, I know you will not understand it. It's not your experience, but I want you to know what I felt. And it's using the voice that you have for folks to understand your plight at that time. If I experienced something on campus with another student that felt very aggressive, that felt very unwelcoming, that felt very intolerant, I was going to have a conversation somewhere, wherever I could, about that. Whether that was go talk to the dean of students, whether that was go talk with, and at the time, Kenley was essentially tasked with serving as quasi, I guess, diversity coordinator at that time, but having the conversation of, this is what happened today, what do I need to do about it? Or this is what happened today, what can you do about it? Because it's about holding folks accountable for the behavior. Now, while I was not able to name that at that time, it was holding folks accountable for the behavior. If you're experiencing things in the community, go to the meetings that they're having in the town. Speak up, show up, let them know, for right now, I'm a resident here, and this is what I've experienced here, and it's not okay. Now do that with whatever feels safe. I will not tell you to put yourself in any type of harm's way or any situation that you don't feel that your safety is paramount. But again, it's bring it to light. Again, sometimes folks don't necessarily know that they're doing things that are creating a hostile environment for others. And then for some, they don't care, it's learned behavior, and they're going to continue to engage into it until they're called out. So use the mediums that you have in order to do so. The beautiful thing of this is that you have a very engaged administration who want to hear from you and the experiences that you're having beyond the walls of the college. Because again, you're spending time and you're spending your dollars as well in that community. So you are valuable. So hold folks accountable, call out the behavior when you need to. And if you're having concerns of being able to call it out on your own, engage the folks that are on the campus to help you do that in the community.
Bonnie, can you talk a little about, so you talked about, in essence, microaggressions, right? That Reagan asked that you experienced maybe on campus, and you talked about you couldn't name them 20 years ago, right? How has that translated for you as a woman of color in leadership roles? And how does that play out now? And what does that look like? Holding people accountable, living in your truth.
So I will refer to my previous position. I served as Associate Dean and Director of Student Integrity at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech is it waffles between 60 and 65% white male, essentially. And with that, that means I'm often, again, at tables with folks who don't look like me. What I have found to be an effective tool is to repeat words back to folks when they say something to you, to repeat it back to them, and let them hear what they've said. But what I recognize is in order to do that, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and making other people uncomfortable. And that is probably the hardest bridge to cross before you can even get to the other piece of it. So in essence, you know, if there's a professor at this point that's questioning my ability to handle a situation, either due to my gender or because they feel I'm too close to it because of my race, and if the verbiage they're using is pretty toxic, I often would repeat it back. Like, so professor, whatever else, you are stating that because this student is a Black student in your course who received an A on an exam and he has been doing well, you would automatically believe that he's cheating. And I am incapable of hearing this case because I am also Black. You'd be amazed at the reaction that you get out of that. So it goes to calling out the behavior a great deal of the time and holding folks accountable for that piece of it. I would say as a woman of color trying to navigate, I'm often balancing trying not to appear angry when it's just assertive. That's what anyone else might be called. I'm balancing appearing to be unprofessional when I am just upset about something that anyone else would be upset by and is perfectly okay with being upset by. I'm often having to balance reacting immediately with delaying my reaction to follow a certain protocol that I've had to put together for myself to make sure that I am not accused of anything other than standing up for myself. So in doing that, again, that's learned. That has been learned over the last 15 years. That is not anything that I had early on, but having some really great, strong women of color around me, having some really great honestly, men and specifically white men to bounce some things off of and to state, okay, here's how I'm viewing this. Here's how I want to react. What would be your perspective in regards to that? So it has to be someone you trust, but it's been helpful using those relationships to help navigate and mitigate circumstances.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor?
Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
If I could interject, you just used the term white men. Obviously, I am the oldest person on this call. And like you, I'm a fellow Akronite too. Went to East High School long before you were born. In fact, I played ball with many Taylors on the East Side, which may have been your friends. Yeah. When I attended Muskingum, some of the people that I attended school with were born before Brown versus Board of Education, were born before Little Rock Central High School. In fact, if you went down on Lakeside Drive, 105 Lakeside Drive at that time was referred to as the Black House. And it was occupied by 4 Black men, except my junior year. One of the guys moved out, they needed a roommate, and I was able to move in. You mentioned have the conversation. What guidance, what words of wisdom could you offer to the folks on this call today to have that conversation? I've been lucky in my life. I live in Athens. You mentioned Southeastern Ohio, and it is beautiful this time of year, except for the ice and snow we're about to get. But at one time, my neighbor to the left was the 4th Black graduate of Little Rock Central High School. And my neighbor to the right is the current head basketball coach at Yale University. How can students of color, minority students, those who aren't part of the majority, shall we say, and I know I put that forward, what suggestion can you give for those folks to engage in those conversations which you talked about? Because sometimes people are reluctant to reach out to have that conversation. How can we initiate that conversations to have a better understanding?
So a couple of things. What I will start with saying is to often ask the students how they are doing. And when listening to the answer, listen for what they're not saying. But even before that, asking that, how are they doing? It's getting to know them so that they feel you are a safe space. I think that's the really poignant part is you have students who are willing to talk about their experience when they know that someone's listening to it. And even if they aren't necessarily able to take the action to rectify the situation, that they're listening and that they're empathizing and that they are a safe space for that individual. So I think it's asking how they are doing. It's asking how they are adjusting. It's truly listening to what they're saying or what they're not saying during that conversation. And even I would say beyond that, when there are, whether it be national, regional, or local issues that occur that would impact that student or that may impact that student, it's asking how that student may be dealing with something. I think a lot of times you have folks who aren't impacted by a particular tragedy or a particular incident or a particular event, but your student or those individuals may be impacted by that particular event. So being able to reach out and ask the question of how are you doing? Is there something that we can do? Is there some space that we can hold for you to be able to express whatever you're feeling at that time? So I think holding the space, asking how they are, and establishing the relationship are very important ways to engage.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? We got about 15 minutes. President Hassler.
So Bonnie, you began to aspire to be a student life professional already when you were at Muskingum, and now you're in different kinds of leadership roles in that world. How has serving in student life changed, do you think, over time? Say in the last 5 to 10 years, kind of in this, and I know you're looking at it sort of from your experience and now as a leader, but how has it changed over time? And what do we need to be conscious of in those changes?
The exposure that our students have to information, to things, to the word I want to use. Just overall, how exposed they are, I think is a major change in student affairs and student life at this point. What I have noticed is that our students now experience so much more than what we did at that time because they see it much more. Saying that cell phones were not a thing when I was in college. And now you have a computer in your hand at any given point in time, and it's exposing you to a lot of information. You have a lot of folks who are providing their opinion that aren't always fact-based opinions. And because of that, it often exposes students to a lot of unsolicited advice about the time in which they should be navigating the world very freely. And even more so, while I am grateful for the increased exposure and focus on mental health, I think it also has put a great deal of pressure on students to be okay because you have so many resources. You should be fine. You have a counseling center on campus. That's not how this works by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that has changed as well.
I'll sneak in here one more time. For some context, I went back to Muskingum to work as a younger student life professional, and a interaction that sticks with me that's connected to Bonnie that I've never told her is that was working with a student, Black male, who won Homecoming King, and he was so stoked and was so excited. And then he came to me and he said, "When was the last time someone of color was a homecoming, you know, queen or homecoming king. And I said, let me tell you about Bonnie Taylor and Jason Goodloe. But that was like a really big deal. And so I think about that in a way that I then connected him to Jason for a mentorship conversation, right? So I guess my question to you that I'm hopeful that the students on the call will also think about is, you know, you talked about your mentors, but what kind of advice would you give students to find mentors and to reach out and make those kinds of connections? Because sometimes that can be a little bit scary if you don't feel like you have an automatic connection with someone.
So in my first position right out of college, I challenged myself to operate in different ways. And when I say operate in different ways, the core of my job was to program for our students, to do some multicultural programming, to do some programming centered on Greek life and some other pieces. And in order for me to do my job, and especially living in rural Greenville, Tennessee at the time, I had to email and cold call. And but that turned out to be one of the greatest things that I have done, because I still carry some of those relationships that I established 15 years ago today. So it was a lot of just reaching out to someone who had some areas of interest for me. I was able to bring, and her name is escaping me and I apologize, but it was one of the first students at Tennessee State University. She actually had to sue the state school system in order to be admitted into Tennessee State University. I was able to bring her to campus free of charge, mind you, because I sent an email when I noted that she was moving back to Nashville. I sent an email and just said, you know, I saw the story. I have students here who I think would greatly benefit from hearing your story. Just some of those pieces, and it was not being afraid to reach out, even if I was not very familiar, or if I knew there was a connection point between me and that individual. It was reaching out to that person to say, hey, I understand that you know such and such. I really would like to have a conversation with them. Would you be okay with connecting us? So it's using whatever relationship you need to get to the resource that you need. I will tell folks that I feel as though I will be a connector for anyone if I can. That is something that I hold dear, because so many people did it for me. It's my obligation to do it for other folks. So even if you don't necessarily see it, or you don't know how you are going to get to that individual, start asking the questions, because you never know who's that 1 degree of separation between you and that other individual. You have no clue. So ask the question. If there's things that you want to manifest in your life, relationships that you need to have, connections you need to make, resources you need to obtain, start telling people, asking questions. You need to put it out there, because you never know who's going to be able to help you get to that point.
Any other questions? Jen, I'm going to let you wrap us up, but Bonnie, I just want to express my sincere gratitude. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, for being so transparent, and for touching on things and normalizing some things that sometimes I think our students don't necessarily talk about, because then it's controversial. So normalizing the stereotype threat, right? Focusing on trying not to be the angry Black woman, but just express an opinion and those kinds of things. I appreciate you. And hopefully this will not be the last time you and I connect. So I will follow up with you, because I know that some of our student organizations are very interested in just connecting with you as an alum and just connecting with you in general. So I will make sure that happens. And I'm going to if no one else has questions, Zoe? Okay. Okay, we got a couple more.
I don't have a question. It's more of just a comment, but also thank you for coming on here, because so I'm a history major. I'm getting ready to graduate, and I love local history. I love learning about how Muskingum's evolved, but really until now, I feel like we haven't learned a lot about Muskingum's Black history, as a college. And I didn't know that there was ever a Black homecoming queen or a student senate president. And some of my friends in the past years have they thought they were the first, or And I feel like that's because we haven't been transparent. Like we didn't know that people like you came before us, like you're part of our history. And I think that's something like I wish I would have known sooner so I could like start working on it now, which I'm going to. But I just like, yeah, I just love history. I'm a nerd, and like being a part of like Muskingum history, like this is so awesome. I'm like so touched to have you here.
Thank you, Zoe. I wish I could say I was the first of some things. I know there were more. My godmother, who has since passed, unfortunately, but Roselle Duncan, and her maiden name is escaping me. She was a student in the 70s at Muskingum as well. So I'm happy to provide you with whatever information I can. This is a point in which I do believe that representation does matter, and it matters, yes, for our Black students, but it matters for all the students to see that there are faces that exist there, that there are students who have come and have worked incredibly hard to make their mark and to create their educational experience. So thank you for that. Congratulations to you as you march towards graduation.
And Sienna, I think you had one, right? Oh, you're muted, sweetie. You're muted.
Now we got you.
You're good. You're good.
She always does this. She always does this.
Yeah. I'm here. I'm here for as long as you want me to be here. You got me.
Okay, I'm Sienna. I'm also a senior. I'm a criminal justice and sociology major. And I had two questions. One's more like a follow-up question. So I am doing my senior studies over microaggressions, inspired by Mrs. Danielle's training for diversity ambassadors. And how do you educate students about microaggressions? Because I know myself, like I didn't know what microaggressions was until I had Miss Danielle's training. So how do you approach students and how do you educate them to understand microaggressions on those lines?
So I think the foundational piece that I use with that is that often with microaggressions, you're so conditioned to hearing them, you don't realize they're being said. Right. So you have to start with the conditioning piece of it and then work from there. It's one of those, I try to describe to students or anyone who asks, if you don't know what a microaggression is, when a person says something to you and you feel slighted, or if there's that gut reaction of that didn't land very well with me. I don't feel as though I was supposed to be laughing with them. I felt as though they were laughing at. Just any of those things where it doesn't uplift, but rather seems to be poking at are where those microaggressions are. So often it's educating about the conditioning to accept microaggressions because it's been part of and to be very honest, a white supremacist framework that we've had for the founding of this country. So it's in the very core and the very fabric. And because often now, well, prior to the past 4 years, it was not that okay to be that bold and empowered in your racism. Microaggressions were how folks were able to feel superior or to down someone else without being outright racist at that point. So it's educating the conditioning and the history of microaggressions to get folks to understand how the microaggressions impact folks. It's about saying something about what I'll say, I'll be very transparent. For years, I was very concerned about ever wearing my natural hair because I thought it would be unprofessional. Unprofessional for a Black woman's hair is the code word for if it's not straight, then it's not right. So it just some of those pieces in which you're having to educate a lot of folks on. I'm like, the way that someone's hair grows out of their scalp is not unprofessional. It just may not be the European standard that we're used to seeing. And that's okay. So with the microaggressions piece, it's understanding the conditioning. It's understanding that it is not meant to uplift. It's rather to point at and to degrade someone in some nature. And even more so, it's some people do it unintentionally, and it's educating them when they use certain language that, that's not landing the way that you think it should. As a matter, you know, I feel as though you're picking fun at me more so than pointing out something that you want to have a conversation about. So the microaggression piece, while relatively new, has been around for decades. We just were able to name it recently. You had a second piece to that?
Yes, I'm sorry, it kicked me out again.
Okay. You're back.
So were you the captain for a cheerleading team? Did I hear that correct?
I was, let's say, my senior year. It would be my senior.
When I heard you were a cheerleader, I was so excited because I also cheered my freshman year for Muskingum, but my experience took a left turn. But with you being a captain, like, how did you experience that? Were you the only Black woman on the cheer team?
All 4 years.
So was I, but then due to captains and a coach, I had to quit. It was a worst experience I had. But I want to know, how did you experience cheerleading as being the only Black woman in the sport, and how were you able to, well, how would I say this? How did you overcome those boundaries and I can't say it right, overcome those boundaries and able to like become a leader, especially a captain? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I am one of those people that when you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go do it. Mm-hmm. So because I recall Lindsay Eric gave me my tour on campus when I was visiting the campus. And that's the name I was going to say, the older alum in the room will recognize. And I remember her saying that she was a cheerleader at that time. And I was like, oh, I cheered in high school. I think that would be really great. I came from a cheerleading squad in high school that was pretty much all Black. So you imagine my surprise when I showed up at tryouts and auditions. I was like, oh, this is different. But I think I've often viewed it, and I'll put this in a larger context, I've often viewed me being the only one as often having to be the representation. And while that's a very heavy burden to bear, it is what it is. So I wanted them to know that, you know, as a Black woman, that I was strong, that I was capable, that I was just as good as anybody else. And we often were going to some places that were for me, I tell folks sometimes I may not have felt the safest, but I just had to have some belief in that I would be fine and I would be okay. And when I say the safest, it's not in terms of crime rates, it was more in terms of environments that were not built or made for me. So it was one of those where I set out to have a goal. I remember trying out my freshman year and thinking, because I cannot recall who was captain at that time, but I'm like, I want to do that. So it was just sheer will and determination. And often I was juggling multiple things. I recall that senior year, I was still an athletic trainer, had RA training, and we had a cheerleading boot camp. All before school started. So I was probably up at like 4:30 in the morning, was running until at least 11 o'clock at night. But it's probably one of the most transformative experiences because I was determined to get the most out of that experience, and then me having that leadership position allowed me to make some changes in ways that may not have been there before. One thing I do want to say to you, Sienna, probably specifically, and I'm talking to you when I say this, is that you are the only one. There are things that you can do from the inside that you can't do from the outside. I was able to have those conversations with my coach about things that I was seeing in terms of work ethic and practice and auditions and tryouts and how folks were being evaluated and how people were judging other individuals. How even in music selection and anything else, terminology that we were using, I was able to change what I could while I was there because I set my sights on that specific position. Am I going to pretend that it was an easy route? No, there's a lot of pushback. There are a lot of questions. There's a lot of microaggressions, a lot of stereotyping and generalization that I did deal with while I was there. But I knew that I could do more good and educate where I could from within.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Could I ask one very quick question?
Absolutely.
As I look at the screen, other than a gentleman who I do not recognize, but who has Muskingum for his name, there are only 2 men on here. How do we engage men in this conversation? Whether they be white, black, Hispanic, or anything else?
That is an excellent question. And it's one that I've grappled with for quite a long time. So I'm not going to pretend I have a full answer for that, but I will give you my experience in that. It has to be relatable, and it has to be something that impacts them directly. You know, I can think of 2 situations specifically. While I was, probably about my junior year, had some friends who, it was one white male, one black male, very close. They had been friends since about freshman year. And I think the best educational experience that came for the student who was a white male came when he was in the car with his friend who was a black male and who had been stopped by the police. I think that was a great starter point for him to understand what life as a black male looked like, or what life as a man of color looked like for him. And it allowed him to have a conversation that he had admitted I never would have had, because I never would have had the experience, or I just never thought about it because it hadn't happened to me. So at that point, it was making it relatable for him, because he had someone that he cared about very much so, who was impacted by something. I think was the first piece. While I am not a fan of you know, the narrative that it has to be and I'll just put it this way. We can think of sexual assault, and often they say, well, what if it was your sister? What if it was your mother? What if it was a woman, period? And I don't necessarily like making it someone that you know, but sometimes it has to be someone that they know, or they have to put them in the place of someone that they know in order to have the conversation about how it's impacting greater society itself. So I've found that engaging males in a conversation, it has to be relatable in a way that they know someone that's been impacted by that particular issue, or that they have experienced something of their own in dealing that particular issue. So it's an area that, you know, it's challenging someone's belief system, essentially. And, you know, the research will state, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but often males have a harder time with changing belief systems. So it's changing a belief system and really challenging them to see the world from a different perspective. Not easy work. And again, I don't have a canned answer for that, but that's where I found I've had the most success.
Bonnie.
Oh, can I say something really quickly?
Yes, you can. Good.
Okay, sorry. On behalf of Black Student Union as a president, I do want to thank all of you, specifically Bonnie also, and Danielle and the Student Life Office, basically, for setting this up. I've seen a lot of transition through Muskingum over the small time I've been here. The 3 years I came in, Black Student Union honestly didn't have a lot of advertisement at that time, so I went to seek it out myself, basically. And from there, I've seen a lot of Black students when they've been touring and visiting Muskingum at least flourish, and those who have come after me. And that's just in 3 years. But I've also seen a lot of growth within the actual school department itself with events like this and the conversations we've been able to hold in our town halls with you guys. So I do want to say thank you all for hopping on this call and having this conversation with us and bringing us some representation that we've seen in the past that we didn't know we had also. So thank you for that.
What I think I'm grateful for is you have a Black Student Union that didn't exist when I was there. So to me, that is showing the efforts of the students, and it's fruitful. So I'm very grateful you have that.
They also have Sisters of Hue, which Sienna is the president of, which is an organization for women of color. It's really all women, but it's, Sisters of Hue, and they focus on issues for women of color and supporting women of color on campus.
I love it.
Well, I do want to be respectful of your time, Bonnie, although I have a feeling you would stay on here all night if we wanted to. But I thank you so much. And it has just really been my honor to always watch you lead with grace and class, and to offer honesty and outrage, but still do it through that lens of just presenting yourself with that grace. And Bonnie, you are a role model, not just for these your classmates and your colleagues and these students, but you are just making such an impact in so many places. And I feel like every time I can talk with you, if it's a Facebook Messenger or a text message or this, I feel like I'm always learning. And I just appreciate you so much. And I appreciate the time that you have given to Muskie's current and prospective and past. And I thank you so much for what you shared tonight.
Anytime. I love that place. It holds a very special place in my heart. Always will. It gave me a start, and it took a chance on me in a lot of places. So I truly appreciate that. To our students that are on this call, you're welcome to reach out to me at any point in time. And I mean that sincerely. If you need anything, you are welcome to contact me. My email is bonnie.taylor@spelman.edu. And sadly, my phone is always connected to me, so you will always be able to reach me at any point. If you do need anything, please, by all means, let me know. You have some fantastic folks that are there. I'm grateful that you have some of the same faces that I had while I was there, because I know you're taken care of at that point. So thank you all for being here, to listening to anything I had to say at all. Congrats, Zoe. Congrats, Sienna. As you will be leaving the institution soon, let me know if I can assist you in any manner. And for Reagan and Cameron, if there's things that you need while you're still on campus, you by all means let me know. And Danielle, please feel free to contact me for anything you need. I extend the exact same thing. I'm happy to help wherever I can.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Will do.
Anytime.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
President Hassel, did you have anything else to say before we ended? I wasn't sure if you.
Oh, I think this has been a true privilege. Always a delight to both hear from you and talk with you, Bonnie. I think the wisdom and insight has just been a gift. And for our students who ask questions, thank you. The voices are so important. I learned a great deal this evening, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, everyone have a good evening. Join us again next Wednesday.
See you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.